First day on the job, I sat down in Eric Hellen's office, and the one thing he told me is, look, if you get anything out of this experience, make sure that you have a philosophy.
Brendon Ziegler, welcome to the Talking Shop podcast. How are you doing today? And tell me something good that's going on in your life.
Oh, just happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Doing really well today. Fantastic thing going on in my life is just the fact that, I have the ability to make athletes better. I enjoy my job, have a great family, blessed with a lot of things. So doing very well.
Fantastic. Awesome vibes, sunny vibes on this Wednesday. So Brendon is the assistant director of Olympic sports performance at Northwestern, in charge of mainly men's basketball, but his passion project is working with the fencing team too, for sure. So Brendon and I got connected with a mutual connection a little bit while ago, with a common interest of mine, a side project about some foot stuff, working with a podiatrist. And Brendon has been nice enough to host me on campus, have a few phone calls, just be super open and honest about his journey and what he's got going on. And I've enjoyed our conversations, and he hasn't blocked my number yet. So he's hopping on the podcast. So he spent, this is year 2 at Northwestern, if I'm not mistaken.
Second year, correct.
Second year, 11 years at Cal State Bakersfield, 5 at Oregon State, a few at Hawaii, a few at Wisconsin. And was the Chicago Bulls your first? I know that was an internship. Was that your first coaching experience, or was it something before that?
I played football at a small school in Minnesota, Hamlin University. I did internships with our strength conditioning coach, Chris Hartman, up there. But the Chicago Bulls was kind of my first one outside of my own college and university. So it was a big step in my career that really helped kind of shape, my beliefs and philosophy and things like that. So
what was it like going from a small school in Minnesota to Vermeil?
Well, it was kind of amazing, like just the facility, the knowledge, everything about it. I was ready to do an internship with an NFL team, and on a chance, someone said, "Hey, one of the assistants from my hometown is with Al at the Chicago Bulls, and he's one of the strength conditioning coaches there. You should go check that crew out." So I was like, okay, I decided to check them out, and I was blown away by the knowledge, by the way they did things, the facility, and I jumped right into that experience, and it was, like I said, such a impactful experience, shaping my philosophy and a lot of different methods that I use today. So,
gee, sounds like I should have gone to that school in Minnesota if you had NFL and NBA offers on the table.
well, one of them was because of my hometown, but the other was because of the connections that Chris Hartman had at Hamlin University.
For sure. So one of the top guys in the college basketball space. I've been blown away just by our little side conversations when I was shadowing not too long ago, and a super nice guy as well. So that's kind of a little bit more kind of brief background. As well as he's a super competitive weightlifter. I know I asked your PRs in kilos, and that threw me for a loop. But for those that speak that language, want to toss out your best snatch and clean and jerk, and then we'll get this party started.
I was average. My best snatch in competition was 140, and best clean jerk was 180. Definitely can't do that anymore, but that was my best at the time. So
for sure. So I always say my best bench is 225 for 10 when I did our NFL Combine draft plan for 8 weeks, benching 3 days a week. And it's not as high anymore, but hey, I did it once, so that counts, right?
Right, exactly.
So we will get into it. So what is the first kind of fork in the road moment, looking back, if you had taken a left instead of a right, kind of this would all be different?
There are so many that I could kind of point to that have shaped me. And there's a lot that have kind of created my career experience and made me who I am today. But I'm going to go back to that original internship that really just set me up for success. And the first day on the job, I sat down in Eric Hellen's office, and the one thing he told me is, look, if you get anything out of this experience, make sure that you have a philosophy. And if you have a philosophy, you can interpret new information, because this field's always changing. There's always new things that come away from a conference, from speaking with somebody, and everything else. And if you have a philosophy, it can really help guide your continuing education experience. And so you know that maybe there's a great method out there, but if it doesn't fit within the context of your philosophy and what you do, it may be not appropriate for you to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that kept me pretty centered, pretty principled. In addition to all the just the great knowledge that they had, from a weightlifting standpoint, they brought in the best weightlifters. From a sprinting perspective, they brought in the best sprint coaches at the time. From an injury prevention standpoint, they were able to bring in some of the best PTs at the time. And they just had this accumulation of knowledge that was tough and difficult to get at that time. Nowadays with the internet, you can look up just about everything. But at the time, that was pretty difficult to do. And they're bringing in weightlifting coaches from Russia. They're bringing the best Canadian, U.S. sprint coaches and Charlie Francis and all these different people. And it was just kind of an amazing collection of information that they had and they were able to offer me. And I was smart enough not to screw it up.
It's a big part of it.
Yeah. And it's amazing how many people went through those internships at that facility and decided that wasn't really for them.
Mm-hmm.
But, just seeing the success that it had, it was up to me to figure out how to implement it for my situation and my levels and things like that. And so it really taught you to be a coach first. We are sports performance coaches, and that coach piece is such a big part of what we do, and being able to teach movement and be able to have progressions, be able to stratify different intensities and different complexities and things like that. And so, I kind of got the cheat code right off the bat. And, my career was much easier based on just that fork I chose.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Frosty, I always choose the path of less traveled, and that's kind of made a lot of difference. And I've done a lot of that in my careers, but that initial kind of decision to do my internship with Chicago was such a big one for my career.
That's great. Yeah, I reference the story a lot. Like, it was freshman orientation of undergrad, and you've learned who the hard teachers are, easy teachers, and all this stuff. And I just decided to always take the hard teacher, Dr. Bird, and I took him every opportunity I could. Long story short, that led to outside the classroom opportunities, which led to him offering me a TCU full ride GA spot right away. So it's one decision, easy teacher, hard teacher at orientation that 4 years later comes back. So it is kind of crazy to look back.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to be a strength conditioning coach like my freshman year of high school. And so
Really? That's early. Did you have like a good high school strength coach, or it's a very niche field?
Yeah. So originally there was a website called allprotraining.com. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was kind of the advent of the internet, and it had different strength conditioning coaches from, NFL to NBA, kind of post some programming and bits of information on this. And I was just fascinated with the training process. And then I went to a football camp and saw a strength conditioning coach give a presentation. I'm like, if that's a full-time job, that's the job I
That's
want.
it.
So I
Yeah.
knew exactly that's what I wanted to do. Went to college my freshman year. I sat down with my academic advisor. I'm like, this is exactly what I want to do. And he's like, well, if you're not going to be teaching physical education, you should seriously think about majoring in pre-med as well. And so
Interesting.
I had to take all the organic chemistry,
Oh no.
chemistries, everything else. So I took it all.
Jeez.
And I'm glad I did. Again, the road a little less traveled.
Mhm.
I think it kind of helps you learn what you're doing from a micro perspective and a macro perspective. There's such a spectrum in our field of kind of what's going on at all those different levels. And if you can kind of understand what covalent bonding is happening at a fascial level, you're probably a little bit better apt to teach somebody how to do a particular movement in the weight room. So,
Yeah.
it's just having a lot of breadth of knowledge throughout that spectrum, I think makes you a better coach.
It's interesting to look at it like that. Like, although I don't recite or quote my textbooks or classes, if I didn't have like just knowing the foundations just helps. Before the CSCS, when you needed a relevant degree, one of my old coworkers, national champion D3 heptathlete, stellar athlete with an accounting degree. And we're like talking in a staff meeting one day, and I don't know why I got brought up, but it was just like rate coding or just something like that. And she was like, "What's that?" I'm like, it's just like kind of how muscles work. And we kind of explained. She's like, "That sounds so cool." It's like, yeah, well, you learned that in like the first class you took, right? So you
Mhm.
don't need it, but I feel like although you won't quote it, just knowing it, you can appreciate kind of everything else on top of it. Um, But going back to kind of the philosophy, as I actually had a call with Al Vermeil. It's kind of crazy. Carl connected me with him, and that's our connection. But with a philosophy, could you define what a philosophy is? Do you have yours off the top of your head? And is there like a formula, or could you walk someone through how to put it on pen and paper, like to turn theirs into real life? Because we all have one, we just haven't put it concisely together.
Yeah, I think like a philosophy is kind of a reductionist statement of the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And for me, it's pretty simple because I just stole it from Al and Eric. We want to make the best athlete possible, and the best athlete that applies the shortest amount of force and absorbs the amount of force in the shortest period of time is going to be better prepared. If you're able to sustain that throughout the course of a practice and a match, you're better prepared. So, I see my job is to introduce the forces that they're going to experience on the court, on the fencing strip, on the field, wherever their arena is. If I'm able to introduce those forces and give them the ability to apply and absorb those forces in a shorter period of time, I've created a better athlete. And, my job is not to necessarily give them the skill work they need. Obviously, I can't make them shoot better. I can't make them, execute a particular play with more efficiency. But if I'm able to kind of own that physical preparation piece of giving them the hardware and horsepower to be able to push off the ground, in a basketball context, that's being able to sprint down the floor and dunk in transition, get your foot in the ground and turn horizontal energy into vertical energy. It's being able for a big man to be at the top of the key and to be able to hedge a ball screen. For a point guard to be able to be at the top of the key and take that first step without really having to telegraph what he's doing from a scheme perspective and defensive perspective. So if I'm able to give them those physical tools and enhance those tools, I really see that as my job. Now, you look at a lot of different other philosophies out there, and there's some great ones that really work just as well. I've just found this one for me works extremely efficient. It keeps me very centered, keeps me very principled from getting too distracted from a lot of different things. So,
With stuff like that, as I've done some work with Jeremy Boone, as my mentor is basically his right hand guy, and some leadership development courses, and to get my phrase of helping athletes and coaches take control of their sports story, I think that's like 7 iterations. So whether it's a philosophy for leadership or for coaching, that it's going to take some time. It's going to be awkward. That you're going to stare at a blank piece of paper for a little while, but you know, going back to the end goal of how effective and how simple, but how guiding it is, I think is a huge lesson to learn. So next, this is one of my most favorite questions. What is the coolest, craziest story? So like looking back, of all the places you've been and all the years that you've had, basically everywhere besides the East Coast. What is the one story that you look back, you're like, I can't believe that happened?
yeah. And again, there's a lot of those in college athletics. It's putting you in a position to meet some amazing people. It's putting you in a position to go to amazing places. And, that's a tough one because there's a lot of things that I've done, being able to meet people like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and the president of the United States and Bill Murray.
Jeez.
I hung out with Bill Murray one time, but the one thing that I would say is just to me the most amazing story is all right. So I was working at University of Hawaii. One of the sports I worked with was football, and we had a linebacker named Adam Leonard, and Adam was a very good linebacker. Ended up playing a little bit with the Seahawks and then the Canadian Football League. And when I moved to Oregon State, I worked with football, but one of my other sport responsibilities was softball, which is how I met my wife, who was assistant coach. Now, one of the athletes, her name was Tatiana McElroy, was one of our pitchers. And so she was from LA. Adam was from Seattle. Well, I found out through the internet that Adam and Tatiana had dated and gotten married. Now, here are two athletes from two entirely different places, two athletes from entirely different schools that both shared me and the strength coach. And I kind of reached out to him. I'm like, I had no idea you guys were together. And they're like, well, one of the first things we talked about on our date was we both had you as a strength conditioning coach.
Wow.
And so here's a kid who played football Hawaii, a woman that played at Oregon State, that found each other in LA and had me
Jeez.
as a strength conditioning coach. So I thought that was kind of just a unique small world kind of story. So that was the one that kind of stood out to me.
Do I call you Cupid now?
I don't think so.
It's funny, a few times kind of on this podcast, I think I'm getting up to 160 episodes, that like athletes meeting or being invited to weddings has been like a common kind of cool or crazy story.
And I've had a lot that, let's say I worked at Cal State Bakersfield. I've had a lot that were athletes at the same school together. Oregon State had a softball player and a basketball player that were at the same school together. But to be from so far away, I thought was pretty unusual.
Do you have a story about watching just the craziest athletic feat, or running into someone kind of unexpected? Or I guess what is one of the craziest kind of athletic things that you've seen, especially in a sport kind of with some freaks like basketball?
There's a lot of them. We had a basketball player at CSUB. We had some amazing athletes at CSUB, but we had one that would do a hurdle drill in which he would do the high hurdles. He would do just a high hurdle hop through. We were kind of doing like a tuck jump through. And at the end of the hurdles, he'd do a backflip.
Oh my
It's a
gosh.
basketball player. This isn't like a gymnast, or, sometimes you get a freak football player or track athlete or something like that. This kid would do a backflip afterwards. And we had a couple kids that could do that. That was pretty impressive. But I've seen a lot of really impressive athletic feats. We had a 6'9" basketball player who cleaned 160 kilos off the ground at Oregon State.
Wow.
We had a football player at Oregon State who he ended up setting the NFL combine bench press record at 49 reps.
Oh, I've seen that video.
Stephen Paya, yeah. So
Mm.
been around some amazing athletes.
Mm. I'm sure the backflips, you gave them a pretty good demonstration beforehand of what it should look
No,
like.
no, break my neck. I would break my neck. Yeah.
When that happens, I would assume that they kind of just felt bouncy and did it. Are you like, hey, let's not do that? Or was it like, all right, good for you? Like, how do you
It was
handle
kind of
that?
one of those moments. It was kind of one of those moments like he nailed it. It wasn't like he was in any danger of missing it. And the entire team was excited. And it was kind of one of those moments where the energy's high, everyone's cheering. And at that point, if I would have stepped in and like, don't ever do that again,
Well, yeah, yeah,
that would have kind of killed a little bit of the mood and things like that. And so he
yeah.
only did
Yeah.
it a few times. And
Gotcha. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, so he viewed it as like just a one-time thing,
yeah,
not just
exactly.
popping off backflips every set.
No, no,
Gotcha.
not exactly. Yeah.
That I could only imagine how much that place must have been buzzing then.
Oh yeah. And we had a really small space as well. So it's loud and everybody's excited. And so it was a good environment.
Very, very cool. All right. So last big question. So the story that you're most proud of. So I like to also call this like the full circle moment. So one that probably took multiple years to look back, where it's like, oh, that happened how it should, or you didn't get the feedback from that one athlete until years later, or something that kind of took a while to ferment.
Yeah, and just going back to my time in Bakersfield, obviously we had a great season this year, and that was fantastic to be a part of here at Northwestern. But when I first got to Bakersfield, it was in 2011. We were a very, very low resourced institution. I mean, I showed up and there was no equipment, there was no space, and anything else. And so it took a while to get everything established. It took a while to get a training culture established, and I would say I was maybe naive to the fact that I didn't think it would be that hard. And so it took a lot of grinding. It took a lot of hard conversations. It took a lot of tough days. But eventually had success there. And we had success in 2015, 2016. We won a volleyball championship. We won a men's basketball WAC championship. And then we won a softball WAC championship as well.
Jeez.
And that was 5 years realized in those moments. of just absolute grind. And there were days where, I had my doubts, and I think everybody had their doubts. And it was just, that was the moment I think everything kind of came together, like, all right, you can accomplish a lot and you can get over a lot of challenging situations. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, we were a low resource institution. We had a lot of different challenges from an athlete's perspective, from a lot of different things that happened. Had a lot of personal things that happened as well. I got sick and got over cancer at the time. And to have that payoff in 2016 was really impressive. And so from a basketball perspective, we had a guard named Dietrich Basel, and he had the game-winning shot over Pascal Siakam, who's an NBA All-Star now,
Yeah.
to bring us to the championship. And so that was a fun experience. And then in softball, with my wife being the head coach in that same year, we were 0-0 championship game. It was one of those, bottom of the sixth, bottom of the seventh kind of moments when our player hit a home run, solo home run to win the game. And it was such a payoff for her as well, because she had lost her mother a couple years before to cancer. And she was the one that hit the game-winning home run to bust the game open and win us a championship. And, she had her challenges as well. And it was just such a great year and time for that payoff to happen, because, like I said, it was a challenge. It was one of those deals where, I wasn't sure if we could turn that place around and get that place viable, because it had just transitioned from Division II to Division I. And at the time, it was not well equipped to handle that. So we had great staff. Coaches were great. We had good alignment across the board. And finally, after some time and grinding away and getting knocked down, we finally were able to accomplish a lot. So
how can you not be romantic about sports? Jeez.
yeah, there's just some amazing moments that happen. And, the one thing that I always tell athletes is, let's not get too high and let's not get too low, because it's easy to get, that Icarus where you get swallowed into the sea, or you get too high and your wings get melted. So, if you can stay the middle ground, and if you can keep grinding away and stay at it long enough, good things are going to happen.
You remember that moment, whether it was like the last session of the academic year or just like walking into your house, just like putting your bag down, it all just like hit you at the end of that year?
Yeah, there was probably two moments of that. There was, our getting back home from that WAC championship in basketball was really one of those deals like, oh, this is amazing. And then there was a moment right after that, like softball game, where again, my wife's team had won the championship, and, we're on the field afterwards as a family. And, between my wife, my son, and my mother and father-in-law helped out a ton with, just field maintenance and everything else. So there was just a moment on there that was just kind of like, this is what we did it for. So
Very, very cool.
yeah.
And then last kind of follow up on that, however much details you'd like to share, but I did not know that you had cancer. If you could share kind of a little bit about that, as I would assume that that's a big moment just for yourself.
Yeah, and the first time I had it, it was 2013. I first started getting some symptoms, and I was misdiagnosed for almost a year.
Oh, geez.
And so I had lost 50 pounds. I had night sweats. They kept telling me I had mono. And I was running just tempo runs on the soccer field with a team, and I couldn't even yell out names or times and names and things like that. So I went to a pulmonologist, and he's like, you have cancer. He's like, I'm guaranteeing you have it. And it was a misdiagnosed scan that really helped perpetuate that misdiagnosis. And so I went through the chemotherapy and didn't miss a day of work.
Wow.
I had a conversation with the time, Chris Carlisle, who was with the Seattle Seahawks. He really provided some great advice. And he said, look, he's like, this is your cross to bear. He's like, the last thing you want to do is turn your couch into a black hole, because it will eat you and swallow you up. He's like, you keep going, you drink a ton of water, you stay as physically active as you can, and you work as long as you can. He's like, because that's what I did, and I got through it fine. So that's exactly what I did. And kept lifting. I contacted somebody at USA Weightlifting. I think I snatched 127 kilos on chemo for
Jeez.
6 months. So I'm like, is that a chemo world record? And they're like, we'll give it to you. We'll give it to you. So that was good. And then later on, I noticed a little lump on the side of my neck and was a little concerned about it. So I went to my doctor right away and he's like, yeah, it's probably nothing, but let's get it checked out. He got it checked out and he's like, I don't like it, but still probably nothing. So they sent me down to UCLA and the UCLA is like, doctor's like, why are you here? I'm like, well, I got this little lump on my neck. And he's like, no, why are you here? I'm like, well, my doctor referred me. He's like, no, why are you here? And I'm like, I don't know what you're getting at. He goes, you're here because I'm the best. And I was like, oh, geez, this is interesting. This is
That's
interesting
how this is
bedside
gonna
manner,
go.
right?
Yeah.
And so he's like, look, I don't really trust that diagnosis. We're going to go in and we're going to do a parotidectomy, which basically means they cut you from the top of your ear down to your collarbone, take half your face off, take this saliva gland out, basically. So they did that. And he's like, that was a tumor like we've never seen before. So they got it biopsied and it was a neuroendocrine cancer of the parotid gland.
Jeez.
And I think I was probably there's probably less than 10 people who've ever had this thing. So unfortunately, I was one of them. So went through the chemo and radiation, but thank God I'm fine today. So
Yes, thank God. That's crazy. So I'm talking not someone famous, someone unique. Very cool.
yeah, the doctor sat down and the first thing he said is he goes, "You are the unicorn of people." He goes, because the first thing he said before the surgery was, this thing could be unicorn, but I don't think so. He sat down, he's like, yeah. He's like that.
Jeez. I don't think I've ever talked about this actually on TSP, but I actually have a genetic. I get like cartilage bumps on my hands and feet. I've had 14 surgeries,
Have
and
you
there's
really?
yeah. I'll have to show you all that stuff later
14.
because they kind of grew as I grew. So I had
Yeah.
one every year till I was 13, and then one when I was 17. There's not. It's called metachondromatosis. A metachondroma is just like a cartilage kind of growth.
Yeah.
And there's not too much out there on it. Wikipedia for how legit that is says there's been like 40 cases or less of that. And I've never met anyone with it. So crazy. I guess
Yeah.
this is a
Well, and the other thing too is that's just like testament to the human resiliency.
wild, yeah.
And it's amazing, unfortunately you watch in chemo, because chemo, you do a whole room together with a bunch of people
Mm,
and you get to see a very myriad of responses to the challenges that life and health throw at you. And you get to see people who deal with it in stride, like you have, and like I have, and you see some people that just they get caught up in the little details. They let the little things ruin their day.
mm,
As a result, it spills over in everything they do, and the next thing you know, they're in trouble because of it.
mm.
So, yeah, just a testament to the human spirit and what we're all capable of and what we can get through.
Yeah, for sure. And looking back, it's never really like crossed my mind of like why me. I think maybe I just like the attention of like having my casts on after a surgery. But I think my parents did a good job of like not making it that big a deal if I
Yeah,
had to look back.
I think as soon as you ask why me, I
Mm,
think you set yourself up for a lot of failure.
mm,
Again, this is kind of an individual cross to carry, and like I would rather go through it rather than my wife or my son or anybody, my loved ones.
mm.
So, like, I feel like I'm pretty equipped to handle that, as weird as that sounds. But yeah, I think as long as you're not letting it like affect what you do on a day-to-day basis, you can kind of compartmentalize it to what it is. You're going to be much more successful because of it.
So very, very cool story. Thank you for kind of sharing all the details. Something I didn't know, but um, has helped make you kind of who you are now. So that is it. You made it through the gauntlet. Appreciate your time and everything. Dropping some bombs for sure. But where can the listeners get more of Coach Ziegler?
I am not on any social media, so probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is email. My email address is Brendon, Brendon .Ziegler, Ziegler at northwestern.edu. If you have any training questions or talking shop, that would be a great way to contact me.
Awesome. So thank you very much for your time. That'll be in the show notes. And I'm looking forward to talking soon.
All right. Thanks, Matt.